Right, welcome to the solution to exercise 4-6, which is on page 142. Before I begin with the solution, I need to draw your attention to the fact that the problem in the text has some typos in it. So if you go to D2L, you can download the one pager that's got the corrections on there, but I'll point those out in just a second. So where the problem shows 650,500, it should actually read 479,500, and where it shows $33 per machine hour, it should actually be $25 per machine hour. So these are corrections to the problem in the text, and please note that my solution is going to be based on the corrected numbers, not on the old uncorrected ones. All right, so with that out of the way, we're looking at the name of the there we go, Chang Company. So we've got some manufacturing overhead costs incurred and some other cost information. The company uses a predetermined overhead rate to apply. Cost of production rate is $25 per machine hour, total of 20,000 machine hours recorded for the year. Compute the amount of under or over applied overhead for the year. Okay, so if we have actual manufacturing overhead, and we were told in the problem that it was 479,500, right? Remember that was one of those corrections. And then we've got the allocated manufacturing overhead, which was the $25 per, I think it was machine hour, direct labor hour, whatever it was, machine hour, times the total number of machine hours of 20,000, means that we have actually allocated 500,000. And so the difference will be the amount over or under allocated. The difference is $20,500. Is it over or under? Well, let's see. Actual 480, allocated 500. We allocated more than actual, therefore it will be over allocated. Okay, number 2. Prepare a schedule of cost of goods manufactured for the year. Okay, so here we have to bear in mind a couple of things, right? When we first introduced the schedule of cost of goods manufactured in the previous lecture, or actually going back to the first chapter, we were using normal costing. In other words, we were using actual costing. So the overhead that we wrote down was the actual overhead that was incurred in the period. As we've now learned, firms don't typically wait to find out what their actual overhead was. They use allocations to estimate and to apply an estimated amount. And therefore, when we do this schedule of cost of goods manufactured, we're not going to list the actual overhead costs. We're going to list the amount that's allocated. So, without further ado, we have Chang Company. Schedule of cost of goods manufactured for the year ended, whatever, or month or what have you. We don't have that detail. Okay, so the first heading, direct materials. And so we have raw materials inventory, beginning, and I'm going to abbreviate just so I've got a bit of room here. And for that we've got $30,000. Add purchases, 500,000 less material inventory ending, and that was 40,000. And I like to put brackets in there just to remind us, or remind myself, that we're subtracting it here. Although because it says less here, technically the brackets are not required. Now, there's one other tricky aspect to this company, and as you look at the problem, your trigger for that is when you look at other costs incurred, purchases of raw material, both direct and indirect. Okay, so raw material includes not only direct material, but some indirect. We're not doing raw material here, specifically we're doing direct material. In other words, we have to back out the indirect material out of the raw material purchased and used, because that belongs in overhead, not in direct material, right? So the indirect material doesn't belong in direct material by definition. So as we look at the detail we've got here, it shows manufacturing overhead costs incurred, indirect materials 34,000. We're going to back that out of our calculation here. So we're going to go less indirect materials, and that was 34,000, right? Because it's lumped in here, right? This is purchases of direct and indirect. If it was clear, purchases of direct material only, then it would be, it would be easier to, we would know it wasn't included. So just keep that in the back of your minds. And so instead of calling this raw material used in production, we have to call it direct material. And so if we add all of this up, that should be 490 less 34 is 456,000. And we will go to direct labor, 85,000. And now we go to manufacturing overhead allocated. Remember what I said off the top? We're not listing the actual overhead cost here now. We're listing the cost that was allocated to our production. And that would be this number right up here, right? $25 per machine hour times the 20,000 machine hours, 50,000 bucks. That is going to go down here. $500,000. Okay, so total manufacturing costs $1,041,000. Add beginning work in process inventory, $50,000 less ending work in process inventory, $80,000. Cost of goods manufactured, $1,011,000. And that concludes the exercise.